Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome to After Hours Screen Talk. I'm Jesse. So, you can currently stream on Shudder the horror movie Unwelcome from 2023. So, a couple years old now, right? But I had completely missed this movie. I had never heard about it until I recently stumbled upon it on Shudder. But having watched it, I was so struck by it that I had to do a video about it. It was directed by John Wright, who is mostly known for making these kind of offbeat movies in the horror sci-fi genre, such as Grabbers and Robot Overlords. But with Unwelcome, he really dips into the subgenre of folk horror, which is one of the most captivating subgenres for me within horror. I will be diving deep into spoilers here, so that's your warning. So, with that said, I will focus on unpacking and exploring the significance of the central creatures or monsters in the movie, the Redcaps. So, the film draws upon actual Irish Scottish folklore, especially the folklore of the little people. But the little people featured in the movie aren't your average kind hearted leprechauns or fairies. No. The Redcaps were actual figures in Irish, Scottish, and British folklore. They were these malignant, bloodthirsty little goblin creatures. And along with unpacking these creatures, I wanted to tie it with the story arc of one of the characters in the film, Maya, because she has quite a fascinating character arc in the movie, which is intertwined with these creatures, the Redcaps. So with that said, let's get started here. The story follows Maya and Jamie, a couple escaping a traumatic urban experience by moving to a remote area of rural Ireland. They were the victims of this terrible home invasion. They inherit a house, but soon discover that their new home is located near an ancient wood inhabited by malevolent goblin creatures known as the Redcaps. When their relationship with a local family sours and Maya, who is pregnant, faces threats, the very violence they were trying to escape in the city comes back to haunt them in this country home, and the spiral of escalating violence just gets worse and worse and eventually leads them into the world of the Redcaps as well. I would describe this movie as kind of a blend between Sam Peckinpah's Straw Dogs and Jim Henson's Labyrinth, because you have a very similar story and character arc as you find in Straw Dogs, if you've seen that movie, with these initially pacifist characters being thrust into a violent situation. They're the victims of horrible violence, and that trauma forces them to confront their own instincts towards violence. All right, let's get right into the creatures, the Redcaps here, starting with their design. So the Redcaps were brought to life using live actors who wore masks and were filmed on double-sized sets to create the illusion of small creatures. So yeah, the Redcaps were created through a combination of practical effects, which include Sean Harrison's prosthetics. He created the masks and prosthetics for the movie. You might know Harrison from his work on the Harry Potter film series, but the design process began with concept artist Paul Catling, who designed the Redcaps to look like a mix of grotesque and ancient creatures with elements of modern and historical clothing. The choice to have live actors instead of puppets was brilliant because that core performance from the live actors gives a grounded sense of realism, which the practical and visual effects just enhance. They just enhance the central performance there from the live actors. Although puppets and puppetry wasn't used for the Redcaps here, they still have this throwback feel of a puppet and this Jim Henson-esque quality to them, which I think is really cool. All right, let's pivot and get into some of the actual folklore of the Redcaps, and I got a description right here, which I got from Katherine Briggs and Encyclopedia of Fairies, where they're described as a short, thick-set old man with long, prominent teeth, skinny fingers armed with talons like eagles, large eyes of a fiery red color, grizzly hair streaming down his shoulders, iron boots, a pike staff in his left hand, and a red cap on his head. These Redcaps were malevolent, murderous little goblins or sprites, particularly associated with the Anglo-Scottish border region. They are known for inhabiting ruined castles and soaking their caps in the blood of their victims. It's cool to see how the movie adapts and visualizes these traditional elements from Redcap folklore, such as their appearance as old men and overall grisly appearance. One way the Redcaps in the film depart from their traditional representation is in the food offerings. I don't think the actual folklore ever mentions food or sacrificial offerings for the Redcaps, although such offerings were an element in other Little People folklore, such as the more good-natured house spirits, the Brownies. I guess blood could be seen as a sacrificial offering, although they kind of don't ask for the blood, they just murder people and take their blood. The movie also very cleverly visualizes the Redcaps' association with ruins and ruined castles and macabre settings, where the very first glimpse you get of a Redcap in the movie takes place at a ruined castle, where you see a Redcap jumping from a castle tower, and it's very cleverly done and catches you off guard, and it was great. I loved it. As far as the Redcap's role in the story is concerned, they of course introduced this supernatural folk horror element into the mix, right? So we learned that those who have honored the old ways, the pagan ways, the ancient traditions, and provided offerings and sacrificial offerings to the Little People, the Redcaps, things go well for them, you know. But if they forget, they lose sight of it, or they're outright disrespectful, then the Redcaps will retaliate violently. So you have that whole layer in the movie going on. But I also think the Redcaps have a deeper thematic significance connected to the themes of violence and trauma in the movie. So, for example, it's important that Maya's character is pregnant, carrying child during this home invasion. So this brutal attack on her is also an attack on her pregnant body. And it connects in a way her pregnancy with this potential for violence, because this trauma haunts her throughout the entire movie. When she's pregnant again and they move to the countryside, her pregnancy carries that weight of violence, that trauma, and that fear of potential violence. And I think this link between pregnancy and violence is personified weirdly by the Redcaps themselves, because they have this macabre elderly appearance, yet also they're very small and childlike, small like children. They're also very playful, mischievous creatures. And so they combine traits of old age and youthful vitality, and in that way kind of personify this cycle of life and death and violence. They have that brutal instinct towards violence. They kind of represent the life cycle we go through and that element of violence that accompanies that life cycle from life to death. Now, I want to segue into the third act and ending of this movie, which brings in more elements from the traditional folklore and also wraps up Maya's character arc in an interesting, fascinating way. Now, we have to talk about Comini's character, Daddy Whelan, who is the patriarch of this family invading Jamie and Maya's home at the end of the movie. He's depicted as this patriarchal and menacing father figure who leads a family of delinquent individuals hired to work on Maya and Jamie's new home before everything goes south. He insists on being called Daddy and abuses his children horribly. His very patriarchal presence is played off against Maya's character, particularly when she undergoes a significant transformation at the end of the movie, where she ends up embracing a protective and even violent maternal instinct, leading her to become Mother Redcap. So what happens is she actively seeks the help of the supernatural Redcap creatures to protect her unborn child and confront the Whelan family. And here shows a willingness to embrace primal and forceful actions to safeguard her child, even engaging in violent acts herself. This, of course, is the turning point for Maya's character. She was formerly peaceful and took a nonviolent approach, but her maternal rage and protectiveness drives her to violence at the end of the movie. Maya follows the Redcaps to a shrine where she discovers an old lady who she realizes is the lost daughter of Jamie's aunt, stolen by the Redcaps ages ago. Refusing to let them keep her daughter, Maya is driven to violence again, killing the old woman who was the Redcaps' previous queen and saving her baby. Impressed by this violent act, the Redcaps recognize Maya's power and ferocity, leading them to embrace her as their new queen. The ending of the film really brings home this transformation, with Maya being baptized in the blood of the old woman in this ritualistic manner and being hailed as the new Mother Redcap. The ending, while shocking on the one hand, is also presented as a kind of liberation for Maya, who finds a new sense of freedom and strength in embracing her capacity for violence, much to Jamie's surprise, of course. By the way, Jamie is an unbearably annoying character. I just could not stand him. Although it does kind of serve this power reversal between the male and female characters, where Jamie comes off as very weak, passive, and ineffective, whereas Maya is the much stronger, empowered character. In my own interpretation, I would also see Maya's transformation as her, in a way, reclaiming these lost feminine energies, these goddess powers associated with these ancient pagan traditions where women, the feminine, were empowered, had leadership roles, had a kind of matriarchal status, and were seen as these divine, sacred figures. Again, this figure of Mother Redcap comes from actual legends and folklore. While the name similarity suggests a possible link, there's no definitive folklore evidence connecting Redcaps to the figure of Mother Redcap. The folklore figure of Mother Redcap is primarily associated with the 17th and 18th centuries. She is often depicted as a fortune teller or witch. The color red was often associated with witches and witchcraft, so the very name, Mother Redcap, has that association. And I would also say that the Redcaps, the little people, the little goblin people, have that association with magic and witchcraft as well. You know, they're magical creatures with supernatural powers and abilities. I can see how Maya's transformation becomes a kind of birthing or rebirth for her character, liberating her from her previous trauma and anxieties, because you have that anointing with the blood, which has associations with birth. But I also think there's another layer to this, which is connected with Maya's very name. And I'm not sure about this, because I haven't read that this was the case, but I suspect they might have chosen her name Maya because of its association with mother figures. So you have these Redcaps who have this cult or society where they worship mother figures. You know, it's a matriarchal cult or society. And Maya was often a name given to goddess figures. In Greek mythology, Maya is the mother of Hermes and associated with the earth and spring. In Hinduism, Maya is the goddess of wealth, love, beauty, and joy, but also linked to the concept of illusion, dream, and magic. Maya's transformation here, I think, very much connects her with these mother goddess figures, but also deepens her connection with these fairy traditions of the little people. And I'm thinking specifically of the Celtic myths of the Tuatha De Danann. So the Tuatha De Danann were a race of supernatural beings or gods, according to legend, who invaded and settled in Ireland. The Tuatha De Danann were believed to be descendants of the powerful and mysterious goddess Danu. They derived their strength from this ancestral goddess figure, Danu. In later myth and folklore, the Tuatha De Danann were forced to seek haven under the earth in the hills, and in that sense also became identified with the She, the Irish fairy, which I think also connects them with the little people folklore as well. And these matriarchal mother goddess elements are one of the fascinating things about the Tuatha De Danann. So Maya's transformation is invoking all these archetypal mother goddess figures, and in a way she kind of becomes a goddess of the fairies at the end. And that's a big reason I love folk horror movies, because they draw from this rich repository of myth and symbolism and bring that into the movie, and this movie does a great job of doing that. Mostly, I would say that some of my criticisms of the movie have to do with it not fully using the potential of its folk horror elements. I think it does a great job visualizing the Redcaps and bringing them to life, but I would have liked to see some of the lore of the movie developed a little more and pushed a little further, just in terms of its visualization. Particularly the Dark Forest. I would have liked to explore that a bit more. A lot of the focus is on the human drama, which I think really grounds the movie. But I think because it has that other world to explore outside of that, I would have liked to explore that maybe a little bit more. But this is a really fascinating movie in the folk horror subgenre. I highly recommend it. I really enjoyed it. I've watched it a few times now, so I would definitely recommend it. It gets my recommendation. So hope you enjoyed the video. Look forward to more reviews coming your way soon, and I will see you next time here.